Live from the I-10 corridor from the Fastport Studios in the city of New Orleans, it's Nemo Nation.
Oh, and it's a pretty day today. Back to you, Jimmy Mack and Dave Nemo.
I want to remind you guys, if you're listening on YouTube and you have not yet subscribed and pushed that notification button, you should probably do that now. Welcome back to Nemo Nation, fast-paced out of the Fastport Studios here in New Orleans. Guys, by the way, Fastport is onboarding veterans as we speak. They're helping with the recruiting challenges that many companies face. They do it through technology, innovation, and of course, as always, people. Go to fastport.com or nationalapprenticeship.org. And remember that the microphones we are talking on, the equipment we are using, are all part of the Fastport family. Big thanks to Brad Bentley and the entire gang over there, here in New Orleans, over in Boston, and every place where Fastport is actually finding people and finding them the jobs that they deserve to give them a purpose-driven life. Welcome back to Nemo Nation. I turn it over now to Dave, who will do the honors of introducing our next guest, who is a regular recurring segment as well. Dave, take it away.
Our next guest is our next friend, actually, Ben Wilkens. And Ben, of course, is the Cybersecurity Principal Engineer at NMFTA, the National Motor Freight Traffic Association. Ben, good morning and welcome back. Always great to have you with us.
Good morning. Thanks for having me back on. I always look forward to this show.
You know, it's weird because you've been on a lot, and every time you've come on, you guys have something new to talk about. You don't run out. we need
we are going full speed ahead over here.
Man, oh man, I'll tell you what. And the newest thing too, and you're covering. You know, it kind of reminds me of Truckers Against Trafficking, TAT, because starting off with truckers. And then it moved to the truck stops. Then they moved into buses. Then they moved into the casino area, railroad. You just the oil fields. They kind of spread the message out. And you guys are really kind of doing the same thing, because your next release, the new release, is called the Vendor Risk Assessment Framework, a tool for owner-operators and fleets or anybody else in the transportation community, as you put it, to use this when they're choosing and onboarding new vendors to make sure that the vendors are making security-conscious decisions. In other words, leave no stone unturned then. What was there something that really flew off the page in terms of, hey, wait a minute, we need to talk to these vendors, or were they kind of just next on the list?
That's a great question, Dave. And you know, it's one of those situations with doing cybersecurity at any scale, whether you're, single owner operator or large enterprise. The idea of making yourself more secure and, hardening your own defenses, that's only a piece of the puzzle, because every time you bring in somebody else's software, every time you integrate with another platform, you're taking on all of the risk of that organization, in addition to your own risk. And so we've often in presentations or in other publications, we talk about, choose secure vendors, or don't forget about vendor security, or make sure you're making security conscious purchases. And so that begs the question, well, how do I do that? And we didn't have a resource available to the public that specifically addressed, how do I choose a secure vendor? How do I ask? What questions do I ask? And how do I ask those questions of my vendors before making a purchasing decision to make sure that I'm protecting myself? And so that was really, as you sort of pull back these layers of the onion, when you start talking about security, you have your internal security, you have your, all of these different pieces. You also have to focus on the security of the integrations and the software that you bring in. So that really was the next logical step in resources to bring to the community for us.
I guess there might be one of the things too, we can kind of walk through these, and this probably would be the best thing to do. You have 5 basic core objectives on these vendor cybersecurity oversight. And the first one is to ensure third-party services do not introduce undue cyber or operational risk. You have to really have a good relationship there then. I mean, you kind of got to get on the inside now. Is that, you can't really do this from the outside, can you?
Well, and that's the thing. It's about backing way up and understanding that when you're looking at vendors and you say, I need this new piece of software, I need this new, whatever the vendor's service is that they provide, thinking about how that might impact the security of your organization. That, let's say we're integrating another piece of software into our operational stack internally. Understanding how that's going to integrate with your systems and really thinking through, okay, how can I ensure that this vendor has thought of these security impacts? And that starts with a conversation in the procurement stage, right? So it starts way before you even make a purchasing decision, to start asking those questions and saying, okay, are you aware of these risks that your product might introduce to my environment? And what have you done about those risks? And so it opens that door to the conversation with the vendor.
You're talking to a guy that wouldn't even know where to begin to ask a question like that. But guys like me don't need to ask a question like that, because there are guys like you that ask those questions. Am I kind of, in other words, do I need to know this stuff?
Well, and so this depends on the organization, who's going to actually be asking these questions. But what we really tried to create here is a cheat sheet, if you will. Mm-hmm. So you don't have to think of the questions to ask. This document walks through the different phases in the procurement and lifecycle management of your vendors, from pre-contract screening all the way through examining the contracts and understanding if those have the appropriate safeguards, and then kind of racking and stacking your vendors based on their criticality to your organization and the level of risk, walking through the onboarding and integration phase and understanding those questions to ask and the gotchas to look for there, and then ongoing monitoring and review of your vendors over time. And we offer a list of questions and sort of ideal answer, unacceptable, but keep an eye on it kind of answer. Mm-hmm. And then the answers that really should give you some pause to say, oh, wait, maybe this isn't the best option. And so we don't want you to feel like as the small fleet or as maybe a brokerage that's starting out and trying to look for vendors, we don't want people to feel like they have to reinvent all of these questions. We want to really give you a guide that you can walk through with your vendors.
Yeah, it's really comprehensive. It's 16 pages of these questions and these kind of like, if this, then that kind of a thing. So it's really comprehensive, easy to work out. 16 pages of stuff, though. There's a lot to really know there. And we'll ask folks to go there. Of course, go to nmfta.org and you can find everything there. But what about obviously fleets, owner-operators have asked you to do this, or you've seen the need for this within the transportation community. What about the vendors themselves? Because they're coming in, they're doing all kinds of stuff coming in from all kinds of disciplines and businesses to your business. What are you getting some feedback already, or is it too soon yet from the vendors,
there's a range
vendor community?
Yeah, that's a good point, Dave. There's a range of responses from vendors when you start talking about vendor risk assessments or vendor security assessments, and it's not unexpected for most vendors out there to start being asked these types of security questions, and they're going to be very familiar with this process. If a vendor is not prepared, that in and of itself is worth kind of making note of, that they haven't really started thinking about the security aspect of their product. And maybe that's one to keep an eye on if they have a good option out there, good product you like, but hold off until they've really started thinking from a security perspective about the impact of that product. And so, it is fairly commonplace in the current environment for a vendor to be asked these questions and to have it in an organized fashion and really just instead of just saying, are you doing security? That's a pretty open-ended question for them, but being able to ask them some very specific, specific tasks and specific behaviors that you're looking for allows that to be a much more structured and a much more organized conversation.
Wow. And this is probably going to be a first time for a lot of folks in a lot of fleets, especially the smaller fleets, to even have considered. Is this something that folks have even considered at this point? In other words, I don't know if us as humans in this business are technically savvy enough and have the depth of knowledge and experience enough to even understand that this is a necessary thing. Do you get that level of, doneness? I guess might be a way to
well, and sometimes that does depend on the operation, but I do think a lot of organizations and a lot of people are feeling like, hey, I know I need to be asking security questions and I know I need to be thinking about this, but where do I even start? What do I ask and what's a good answer? How do I quantify if this vendor's giving me the right answers or answers I should accept? And so that's really what we're trying to, that role that we're trying to fill here is to offer some kind of a springboard to get you into vendor risk assessment as a process without having to come up with a list of questions and research what's a good answer, what's a bad answer, what's a warning flag. So yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I think a lot of people know that maybe we should do this, but how do we do this? So that's what we're looking to help with.
And here's the how. And you guys have been behind just so many efforts like this to nail down so many problems. I asked the question just a little while ago, has the transportation community been surprised at how fast and how deeply sophisticated crime rings, theft rings have become? And the answer was no, not really, because it's been building slowly for such a long time. But a lot of times when things build slowly for a long time, you don't notice that too. So it can sneak up on you both ways, can't it?
Absolutely. It's that classic, the example of the frog in a pot of cold water.
Yeah.
Turn the temperature up slow enough and they'll stay in there. So that's kind of the situation we're in with cybercrime, I think. You're right that it's been building for a long time.
Yeah.
Ben, promise me the next time you come back, because one of the things that, and by the way, everything you guys have talked about has been spot on and on the money, but promise me when you come back, we'll talk about the reason why that you guys have expanded your partnerships is that you guys have become aware of the fact that there are so many more routes into the supply chain, that because all of these organizations that surround the supply chain all have cybersecurity issues, as we learned from the ELD, you can actually get in through people's back doors and figure out ways to actually mess with the supply chain in all sorts of different routes. You guys are trying to cut off every potential route into the supply chain. Is that fair?
Absolutely. That is exactly the point we're trying to drive home. You can put the best lock on the front door, but if you leave the back window open, there's still a way in.
That's a heck of a place to end it here. Ben Wilkens of the NMFTA. He is a cybersecurity expert extraordinaire, and he spearheads research initiatives and leads teams dedicated to developing cutting-edge cybersecurity technologies, methodologies, and strategies to safeguard information systems and network. We are always thrilled when he can make time for us. Ben, as always, thank you so much for being a part of the conversation.
Absolutely. Happy to be back on. Great to talk to you guys again.
Thank you, Ben.